All right, good afternoon. What did I just fix? Okay, we got two people in. Folks are coming slow this morning. Okay. Well, while we are waiting on folks, I think you all started the microscope activity. Make sure you get that's still this quarter activity that is not going to show up in the grade book for the past 9 weeks. So make sure you get that in though, because we're going to move on to energy. All right, Ethan, I just took care of that. So you're good. Thank you for making that effort. All right, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. All right, just for the record, the grade book closed today, so it is what it is. And thank you for those of you who made the effort to get to that passing grade. Thank you, thank you. We're doing cell energy, so if you would log into um, if you log into Canvas and look up cell energy, look at the overview page while we're waiting for folks to still come to class. Absolutely, go ahead. Still got quite a few people missing, but again, I'm gonna pull mine up, share Get everybody where we need to be. All right, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. We are in Canvas looking at the overview for cell energy. While we wait for folks to come in. Folks are very late today, but we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so everybody should be in Canvas. Everybody is in Canvas. All right, so this is where we are. We have been talking about activity in the cells and the function of the organelles. And now we're going to look most specifically at our chloroplast and our mitochondria as we talk about um, how the cells make energy, or use energy, produce energy, share energy. All right, so we're going to get a little chemical in this unit. There'll be equations to look at and molecules to look at. So take a few minutes to look over the vocabulary list. So we're going to learn what is ADP. And we talked about ATP, and it's the same thing, except ATP starts with ADP, and that this is adenosine diphosphate, and ATP was adenosine triphosphate. And so we know this to be if you look down at your vocabulary list, that is your energy molecule. So we're going to look at exactly how we build this energy molecule, how we break it down, and how it goes through a cycle of uh, delivering the energy and picking it back up. All right, I got somebody logging in who should have been in my last class. I think. All right, Sharad, you should have been in the last class. This is fifth period. Unless you have a question for me. All right. So again, we're going to watch an introductory video, and they're going to talk about how the energy is cycled, photosynthesis and cellular respiration, again, the mitochondria, and the different parts of our cycle and what that has to do with metabolism. Okay.
Are you a morning person? One of us is, and one of us is definitely not. Mainly because when I wake up in the morning, it just takes a while for me to get my energy back. It takes a lot of time and coffee for that to happen for me. Cells really don't have that luxury. They are busy performing cell processes all the time. Active transport of many substances needed for their survival, for example. And the energy currency they need, specifically, is ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's a type of nucleic acid, actually, and it is action packed with three phosphates. We have a video all about ATP and how it works as an energy currency. So, where am I going with this? Well, cells have to make this ATP. It doesn't really matter what kind of cell you are, prokaryote or eukaryote, you have to make ATP. The process for making that ATP can be different, however, depending on that type of cell. One way is called aerobic cellular respiration. Lots of organisms can do aerobic cellular respiration, but this video is specifically going to go into aerobic cellular respiration in eukaryotic cells. That means this video is talking about the process within cells that have membrane-bound organelles, such as a nucleus and mitochondria. Eukaryotic cells include the cells you'd find in protists, fungi, animals, and plants. The mitochondria, which can be found in most eukaryotic cells, are going to be kind of a big deal in this aerobic cellular respiration because some of the process occurs in the mitochondria. So let's get started. Remember, the major goal for any organism performing this is to make ATP. Okay, here's the overall look at the equation for aerobic cellular respiration. Remember that reactants, inputs, are on the left side of the arrow, and products, outputs, are on the right side of the arrow. This equation, by the way, looks remarkably similar to photosynthesis.
Okay, so let me stop it right here. So we're going to actually be writing, like I said, there's a little chemistry involved in this. So we're going to be looking at what these molecules look like. So these two equations are going to be very important for you to learn. All right, so we're going to have a moment when you write this down. In fact, I'm going to pause it here and let you write both of those down right now. Okay, so the top one, she said, is cellular respiration. And then the bottom one is photosynthesis. So take 2 minutes, 2 minutes, two, to write these both down. Then listen to how she says that they are similar. Okay, I'm gonna let it go. But you'll see
Look
it
at how the
again.
reactants and products are on different sides. While that doesn't mean they're simply opposites, it does show that they have substances in common. In photosynthesis,
Okay, I'm gonna pause this for a minute. Those are the other words you have to be recognize. Reactants. Reactants are the things like it says input that go into an equation. The products are what it makes, so the output of the equation. So she's going to ask you to look at is the difference between the input on one equation and the output on the other, and the output on one and the input on the other. So notice those similarities.
organisms make glucose. Notice how glucose is a product. But in cellular respiration, organisms break the glucose down to make ATP. Fun fact, you know how when a bean seed first germinates in the ground, it isn't able to do photosynthesis yet? Yeah, the germinating bean is relying on glucose that it has stored, and it's doing cellular respiration to break it down to make ATP so it can grow. Of course, once it starts to mature and develop leaves, it can do photosynthesis. It will be able to do both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Plants make glucose in photosynthesis, and they break it down in cellular respiration. They can do both. But if you aren't photosynthetic, such as a human or an amoeba, you have to find a food source to get your glucose. You need glucose to get this process started, and we're going to assume that we're starting with one glucose molecule. Step 1. Glycolysis. This step takes place in the cytoplasm, and this step does not require oxygen. It's considered anaerobic. In glycolysis, glucose, the sugar from the equation, is converted into a more usable form, called pyruvate. Glycolysis usually takes a little ATP itself to start up. The net yield from this step is approximately 2 pyruvate and 2 ATP molecules, and 2 NADH. What is NADH? NADH is a coenzyme, and it has the ability to transfer electrons, which will be very useful in making even more ATP later on. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, an intermediate step occurs. The 2-pyruvate are transported by active transport into the mitochondria, specifically the mitochondrial matrix. In the mitochondria, pyruvate is oxidized. The 2-pyruvate are converted to 2-acetyl-CoA, which will be used by the next step. Carbon dioxide is released and 2 NADH are produced. Step 2, the Krebs cycle, also called the citric acid cycle, still in the mitochondrial matrix. The citric acid cycle is considered an aerobic process. While the cycle doesn't directly consume oxygen, some of the events in the cycle need oxygen to continue. To learn more about this intricate cycle where the 2-acetyl-CoA will enter, check out the further reading suggestions in the video details. Carbon dioxide is released. We also produce 2 ATP, 6 NADH, and 2 FADH. FADH is also a coenzyme, like NADH, and it will also assist in transferring electrons to make even more ATP. Step 3, the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. This is just a beautiful thing, really. In eukaryotic cells, this is still in the mitochondria, and to be more specific, it's involving the inner mitochondrial membrane. We do require oxygen for this aerobic step. This is a very complex process, and we are greatly simplifying it by saying that electrons are transferred from the NADH and FADH to protein complexes in electron carriers. The electrons are used to generate a proton gradient, as protons are pumped across to the intermembrane space. All these protons being pumped out into this intermembrane space generates an electrical and chemical gradient. The thing is, if you remember from our cell transport video, ions, like the H+, don't easily travel across membranes directly without something to travel through. The protons can travel through an amazing enzyme called ATP synthase. If I could be any enzyme, I'd be ATP synthase because it has the ability to make ATP by adding a phosphate to ADP. ADP is a precursor to ATP. ADP has 2 phosphates, but if it obtains a 3rd phosphate, it becomes ATP. So, in chemiosmosis, the protons travel down their electrochemical gradient through a portion of the ATP synthase, powering it to make ATP, the ultimate goal. Oxygen is the final acceptor of the electrons. When oxygen combines with 2 hydrogens, you get H2O, water. If you remember from our equation, water is a listed product. Now, the electron transport chain in chemiosmosis step makes a lot more ATP compared to the other two previous steps. How much? So I've noticed in my years of teaching and the assortment of textbooks I've collected over the years, there are some different numbers in cellular respiration charts. In fact, you can even see them change a bit in different editions of the same book. And it's made me want to emphasize that it's important to not just memorize a number, because it really is more of a range. I want to focus less on the number of ATP made per glucose molecule because it depends on a lot of variables. One variable is the gradient we were talking about, how many protons were pumped across the mitochondrial membrane. You can see more variables discussed in the factual references, and those references have estimates ranging from 26 to 34 molecules of ATP per glucose molecule in the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis step alone. Then, if you add the other two steps, Krebs, otherwise known as the citric acid cycle, and glycolysis, you could estimate a range of anywhere between 30 to 38 net ATP molecules total per molecule of glucose. Again, to emphasize a range. Now, this was just one way of creating ATP. But like we had said at the beginning, all cells have to make ATP, but the way they do it can differ. If there's no oxygen available, some cells have the ability to perform a process known as fermentation. It's not as efficient, but it can still make ATP when there isn't oxygen. We have a video about that. We can't emphasize enough how important the process of making ATP is for cells. For example, cyanide, which is found in some rat poisons, can block a step in the electron transport chain, which would block ATP production. A poison that prevents ATP from being produced can be deadly. With the important role that mitochondria have in ATP production, there is also a demand for increased research on mitochondrial diseases. We are confident that the understanding of how to treat these diseases will continue to improve as more people like you ask questions. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
All right, now I know she talked kind of fast, and I'm gonna make sure this is saved to your um, folder. But that gives you an overview of where we're heading. So that kind of gives you a feel for how deep this is going to get. So paying attention and doing things as we are doing them in class is very important. Falling behind can really cause you to fall behind. So I'm going to need you to stay focused. And on top of things, let me remind you again that this is an end of course class. And at the end of the year, you're still going to have to remember what is ATP. So in Canvas, I just turned the page to past the vocabulary. And this is where we are. For those of you who came in late, we are in the module for cellular energy. CE, cellular energy. So we're dealing with energy on the cellular level. So we're dealing with those, as she was showing you, in going through the cell membrane and dealing with the mitochondria and the chloroplast, what they have to do with energy. Okay, so energy is, like as it says in the first one, is the E in Miss Grin. It is a requirement. All living things are required to use energy. Okay, they need it to survive. They're not able to do anything without energy. Some of y'all sitting here like you didn't have any breakfast or lunch because you're low energy. Okay, so energy is very, very necessary for living things. All right, so let's look at, and she talked about ATP. So you need to know what ATP is. So write this down. Just write down ATP is the abbreviation for adenosine triphosphate. And knowing that it's a triphosphate is important because it gets smaller. So tri means there's three of them, three phosphate molecules. Okay. And during the process, as we go through, like it said earlier, it'll become ADP, which means it lost one and it's only two. And at some point, there is possibility of having AMP, which means it's monophosphate. But the objective is to have the big energy molecule ATP. Okay. Your body does all kinds of stuff. Even as you're sitting there, it's relaxed, supposedly doing nothing. Your heart is beating, you're breathing, your eyes are flashing, flickering. Um, what else? Just sitting there, your neurons are running through your body. All that requires energy. So even when you think you're doing nothing, your body is doing something and it requires energy. All right, and all of this has, again, we're talking on the cellular level, has to pass through that cell membrane. So knowing the structure of the cell membrane from the last module is still important. All right, cells, are cells too small to be able to work? No, they are important. All right, they are important for growth and repair. When people die of natural causes, it's because eventually you have enough cells that are not working, not growing, not repairing themselves till it starts to affect the functioning of the whole organism. So energy is required for growth and repair. Energy is required for active transport. We talked in the last lesson, there are two types of transport, passive and active. Some things just pass through the membrane with no problem. Some things that are too large to pass through the membrane have to be brought in. So they call that active transport. And reproduction, all for the cell to divide. And that's a whole nother lesson we're going to do later on. In order to create new cells, not just new human beings or new organisms. When cells die, cells need repairing, they need to be replaced. So reproduction is part of growth as well as creating a whole nother organism. All righty. All right. If you look at, and I wish they had given you a bigger picture of, I'm going to send you a picture of the ADP molecule, but if you look at it at the top, let me zoom this out. That's what I can do. I can zoom it out. Okay. All right, make it a little bigger. All right, so when we say adenosine triphosphate, our adenosine part is this molecule, and we had a molecule similar to that when we were talking about DNA. And then we have the ribose part. So up to this point, it kind of looks like DNA, except you've got three phosphate molecules. When we were looking at DNA, it only had one, and all of the molecules were connected by that one phosphate, and that made the sides of the ladder. This one is a molecule all by itself, and it has has three phosphates. So we're starting at the top, it's a triphosphate, and then as it goes through the cycle, one of the phosphate, those bonds between those three are so strong that if you break them, they give off a lot of energy. So that's where you see that little star spark right there, indicating that energy is released just because one of those bonds was broken. So you got one phosphate going off to do its thing. It's actually going to be recycled and come back and join again later here on the other side. But when it breaks off, it releases energy, and that's where the cell is getting its energy. Now the molecule is called ADP because it only has two. And then eventually, somewhere along the line, it's going to pick up in the process of being needed. So we recycle this molecule. It does its job, gives off the energy, and then it comes back around, picks up another one, and comes back to do some more work. Okay, so this is a cycle. It gets recycled all the time. Okay, and these are our energy sources. Carbohydrates, so like our glucose, proteins, and lipids. So those were our macromolecules that we talked about at the beginning of the course. All of them contain energy. Now, Carbohydrates is at the top because that's its major job is to provide energy. And then you can get a lot more energy from a lipid, but that's not the body's first choice. It's harder to break up a lipid than it is a carbohydrate. So if it has a choice, it's going to get its energy from the carbohydrate. And last choice, if you don't have any one of those other ones, it'll start breaking down proteins to get energy. Okay, but the body will find a way to get energy. Okay, and carbon dioxide in plus some water and then oxygen out, and creating these molecules to get energy. There are different words that we're going to talk about. Biosynthesis. Synthesis always means to make, and making things in a living bio or living things. Detoxification is removing toxins. Thermogenesis, we're going to talk about heat energy. And we're going to talk about the ion transport system, like she kind of talked about it in the video, and muscle contractions. The objective is to get your muscles to move and do what they need to do so that you can move, and your eyelashes move, lungs move. All of those are tissues that have to have energy in order for them to do what they do. Okay. All right, the sun, and this is something you got to remember for forever, 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 that the sun is the ultimate source of energy. And photosynthesis is the only way that we get the energy from the sun. We can't breathe it in, we can't eat it. Photosynthesis is the only way, which means it has to start with plants. We don't photosynthesize, but we need the energy that the plants get from photosynthesis. All right, so then the plants make their own food, and then they use it. And then we eat the plant, and we get that food that the plant created. And then we can get our energy from that. All right. And there's our sin. So if you wrote down those two equations, write down somewhere, either write it above it or below it, what it says here. You have 6 molecules, and like I said, when you get to chemistry next year or whenever you get to it, you'll learn that these numbers in front mean that we're balancing the equation, and it has to do with conservation. We cannot put more into an equation than we get out. So if we start with 6 molecules, we have to end up with 6 molecules. The only thing the chemical reaction does is rearrange the elements. So if you look at it very closely, that 6 in front of that H2O, and this is kind of like math when you have the coefficient in the front of a equation. That big 6 in the front multiplies everything inside. So it multiplies the 2 hydrogens and the 1 oxygen. So that means I've got 12 hydrogens on this side and 6 oxygens in that water molecule. So that's how much it has to start with. And then when we get to the other side, you see that glucose is made up of those 12 hydrogens that we had on the other side. And some of the some of the oxygen is in the glucose, and then some of the oxygen is actually released by itself. But all together, you're going to have the same number. Actually, it becomes a little complicated because we have to include our carbon dioxide. So we've got 6 carbons on this side, 6 carbons on that side. We've got, if you go 6 times 2 oxygens, that's 12 plus the 6 we had over here, which makes 18. So we've got to account for 18 oxygens on the other side. And I'm just going through this to make it clear. You don't have to remember that right now. You just need to know what the significance of those numbers are. But we didn't lose anything. We still have 6 oxygens are in the glucose, and then we've got the other 12 oxygens that are being released into the atmosphere. All right, down here to the bottom, the same thing. So that's photosynthesis. We take that glucose now, and we add some oxygen back to it. Notice we still have that 6 molecules of oxygen have to be added back. And then we get water, which we exhale as water vapor, and we exhale the carbon dioxide. But then Our body keeps the energy molecules that were made by breaking down the bonds that hold the hydrogen, the oxygen, and the carbon are held together by bonds. So when we break those bonds to rearrange them to create the water and the carbon dioxide, we release energy. And like she said in the video, we're going to use 36 as our number because that's the number that's in your canvas right now. It changes sometimes, but we're going to hold on to 36. But 36 is going to be what we start with. Okay, and then once we create it, then we got to use it. So that 36 ATP will get turned into ADP, and it'll go in different places and get used for different things. And will diminish in number, but then it'll be recycled and come back around and build back up. All right, here again, now this one, I'm gonna have a quiz on this. You're gonna get a worksheet that's gonna actually ask you to label this. All right, so this, like I said before, we have our two equations, photosynthesis and respiration. We need to remember that photosynthesis happens in a plant cell, and where it happens in the plant cell is in the chloroplast. Okay, and that's when light energy is absorbed by these little structures inside the chloroplast, and then it is used to combine the carbon dioxide and water, and it makes the sugar and oxygen. So again, remember this picture, because like I said, you're going to get a little quiz and you have to label all of this cycle. And in fact, I think it's on the test too. So remember, the first from the chloroplast to the mitochondria is sugar and oxygen are needed. And then it goes to the cell. It could be in a plant, because plants have cells too. Remember the chloroplast. Plants have to make the energy in order to make the food in order to use it for their life functions. We eat the plant and then we use it in our mitochondria to create the energy. So notice it goes to the mitochondria, energy is released. So that little burst there is used for cellular work to do all the other things that the cell needs to do, like active transport, making proteins. All of those things require energy. Reproduction, we're going to talk about how the DNA makes more, how it makes the protein. So that requires energy. All right. A little bit of energy, anytime you do something, a little bit of energy is lost to the atmosphere. So it is not always directly transferred. Actually, we forgot to click on these things. All right. Let me go start back over here. All right. So it reaches autotrophs, means that they make their own food, self-feeding. Trophics are feeding, auto self-feeding, and those are plants. All right, the sunlight, the chlorophyll is the chemical inside the chloroplast that absorbs the sunlight energy to break the bonds of the sugar. All right, then we have our ATP is a chemical form of energy. The mitochondria in both heterotrophs, that means those that take their food from outside the body, as well as autotrophs, which are plants, for cellular respiration. Okay, so again, remember, respiration doesn't just occur in animal cells. They occur in both plant and animal cells. All right, over here. Anytime work is done, some heat is lost to the environment. It is not directly transferred. But then in the process of creating the carbon dioxide and water, notice we start the process all over again. So this is a cycle. All right, so again, this is a picture you need to study, because you'll see it again. All right, I'm going to stop talking and stop sharing and let you work on this. I need to do attendance. So go through this, quiz yourself on this, and then I'll come back in a few with something else for you to do. And then when you finish that, look at the before you go. Um, all right, make sure you check your answers when you're done, because you know I use those as a quiz. All right. So when you turn the page, the next thing they talk about is autotrophs and heterotrophs. So we're going to look at that right now.
Do you have a favorite animal? I went through many favorite animals when I was a kid. The velvet ant, the sea pig, silky bantam chickens. Okay, that one might actually still be my favorite. What I loved most, though, was collecting facts about different animals. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I could tell you how much a silky bantam chicken weighs, on average, or where you would find a sea pig. But of course, one fact to always know about your favorite animal is what your favorite animal eats. Are they herbivores, which means they eat plants? Carnivores, which means they eat meat? Omnivores, which means they eat meat and plants? And there are more categories than this. Even though all my favorite animals ate different things, they all had one thing in common. They were all heterotrophs. Generally, animals are heterotrophs, which means they consume organic matter. It doesn't matter whether they are eating plants, meat, or both. They are heterotrophs, also known as consumers. Along with animals being heterotrophs, so are fungi, some protists are heterotrophs, and some bacteria, and some archaea too. But not everything on this planet is a heterotroph. Do you have a favorite plant? That may be less popular than having a favorite animal. Plants are generally autotrophs, which means they make their own food. To be more specific, they make organic substances, such as glucose, from inorganic substances, such as carbon dioxide. If talking about plants, their source of energy to do this is light. Plants are also known as producers. Their food is glucose, an organic substance which they produce in the process of photosynthesis by using inorganic substances such as carbon dioxide. Oh, and even the plants known as carnivorous plants still produce their own food using photosynthesis. It's just that carnivorous plants can also digest insects to obtain nitrogen. Nitrogen is an important element that living organisms need, and it turns out that most carnivorous plants live in areas where there is low nitrogen in the soil. Along with plants, some protists are autotrophs, some bacteria, and some archaea are too. Now, it's also possible that an organism itself can be both an autotroph and a heterotroph. In our protist video, we talk about euglena. Euglena can do photosynthesis as autotrophs, but they can also be heterotrophs and consume organic matter in cases where light is not available. So far, we've been pretty general with showing examples of heterotrophs and autotrophs. But what if I told you that it can get a lot fancier? And we're going to go into some more depth, but we want to point out that you can still get into more depth than we'll be getting into. Check out the further reading details for more. And as always, there are fascinating exceptions in biology that we can't include in such a short video. So we gave a general description that autotrophs make their own food. That is, they make organic substances from inorganic substances, and heterotrophs instead must consume food, meaning they must consume organic substances. If you remember from our biomolecules video, the molecules that make up life, they all have carbon. So the source for carbon is important. Autotrophs and heterotrophs obtain carbon differently. Autotrophs generally use an inorganic source of carbon to make their food. Heterotrophs instead must get their carbon from organic sources that they consume. But there are also other terms here. Photo, meaning light, and chemo, meaning chemical. Instead of the carbon sources, these terms refer to the organism's energy source. So when we've been talking about plants, a plant is an example of a photoautotroph because a plant uses light as an energy source. But not all autotrophs use light as an energy source. Have you ever heard of the deep sea vents? I'll never forget learning about these when I was a kid. I used to think, how can anything live down there with the lack of light? Plus, the substances there, like hydrogen sulfide, which is something that can be dangerous to many other organisms, and the extreme temperatures. There's still life down there. Bacteria that are chemoautotrophs are a great example. They are autotrophs as they can make their own food. Recall that as making organic substances from inorganic substances. But their energy source is chemical, hence the name chemoautotroph. They can oxidize inorganic substances like that hydrogen sulfide we mentioned. For chemoautotrophs, the chemical they use depends on the species, but no light required. So we know humans are heterotrophs. Humans, as well as other animals, are examples of chemoheterotrophs. Humans, as well as other animals, have to consume organic matter, and it is also organic compounds that act as their energy source. Okay, that leaves one more, right? We had chemoheterotrophs, photoautotrophs, chemoautotrophs, and we're missing photoheterotrophs. This one has always been a bit challenging for me to wrap my mind around. They are heterotrophs, which means they do consume organic matter. But that photo prefix means their energy source is light, which they require. This mode of nutrition is found in a few
All right, I'm going
types.
to pause it there and take the closed caption so that you can see it. All right, I want you to copy this map. Okay, copy the map. Make a note of it. Concept map. You don't have to say start here because we know we always start at the top, but do write what is the carbon source. So there are a molecule is either organic or inorganic. If it is inorganic, something like carbon dioxide, it's got carbon in it, but it's not considered an organic molecule. When we talked about our macromolecules, they always had hydrogen in them. Hydrogen was always connected to the carbon. On this side, they're not going to, inorganic molecules don't have hydrogen in them. They might have carbon. Most of the time, they don't have carbon either. So water is inorganic. So then they go from asking you what is the carbon source to what is the energy source. And you can have, so your inorganic molecules means that they can get their energy from other chemicals, not necessarily glucose, which is an organic molecule. So there are some organisms that live deep down. They can't photosynthesize, so they have to get their energy from chemicals, but they're still using the chemicals to make their own food, so that's what makes them an autotroph. Then you have those that get their energy from the light, and those are photoautotrophs. So photo, light, autotroph, making their own food. And you have the heterotrophs that do, they have to take their energy. They don't make their own food. They have to get it from outside of the body. Then again, you have those organisms deep down in the ocean that also will get their energy from feeding on chemicals, not making their own, but they feed on chemicals to get their energy. And over here, there are some that get their energy from light. Just a reminder that the grade that you see in the grade book now is the grade that is being posted. As soon as I get out of class, I'm posting grades. There's no. Everybody ought to be where everybody needs to be. Okay, I'm going to back it up just a little bit so that she's still talking about it, but you still have time to draw if you draw drawing.
Source. Okay, that leaves one more, right? We had chemoheterotrophs, photoautotrophs, chemoautotrophs, and we're missing photoheterotrophs. This one has always been a bit challenging for me to wrap my mind around. They are heterotrophs, which means they do consume organic matter. But that photo prefix means their energy source is light, which they require. This mode of nutrition is found in a few types of prokaryotes. Now, it's important to mention that these organisms will do some form of cellular respiration to further break down their food to generate ATP. And by food, it can be food that was consumed, like heterotrophs, or food that they produce themselves, like autotrophs. However, cellular respiration processes can vary. The process may involve oxygen, or no oxygen, different electron acceptors. It's exciting, and it's in some different videos. Overall, the beauty of how organisms obtain what they need to survive just continues to amaze us. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay. All right, so, and see over here, they're discussing autotrophs and photosynthesis. So last thing we'll do is look at this one because it's short.
NASA's Aura satellite is one of several spacecraft that are helping scientists study the Earth's atmosphere. Along with ground instruments, it can analyze the atmosphere and pinpoint its composition. It builds a picture of the nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide that together make up 99% of the air we breathe. This computer visualization shows how the Earth's atmosphere changes over 24 hours. During the day, oxygen, seen here in blue, rises all over the planet. At night, carbon dioxide, shown in orange, is on the rise. And the oxygen we need is given to us by plants.
Before plants, there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. So plants did all the hard work of allowing the atmospheric concentration to build up over time, allowing all other life to develop. They made the place habitable for us.
Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and expel oxygen. They produce so much that the vast Amazon rainforest is often called the lungs of the Earth. But the real picture is more complex. The verdant wilderness of plants and animals is one of the oldest, most abundant living systems on Earth. Over 2 million square miles of lush rainforest teem with half the world's living species.
The Amazon is the largest natural preserve of life on the continents that's left in the world. Thousands of miles of almost virgin forest, thousands of species that have been there for an awfully long time.
So dense is the Amazon jungle that it has a dramatic impact on the air above it. It starts in the trillions of leaves far below. We can use animation to show what this invisible process known as photosynthesis might look like. During the day, the leaf takes up carbon dioxide from the air, seen here in orange. It converts the carbon into sugar for energy and growth, and releases oxygen, seen in blue. Each one of these trees will release hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of oxygen in the course of its life. And as for the Amazon as a whole, a fifth of the world's oxygen is produced here. But there's a surprising twist. We will breathe almost none of it. Satellite data and ground measurements revealed that almost all the oxygen the Amazon produces during the day remains there and is reabsorbed into the forest at night.
With the advantage of the satellites, we can now see that the Amazon basically uses all its own oxygen and uses all its own carbon dioxide. It is, as far as we can tell, almost a closed system in itself, almost.
Alrighty. Because they like to, and I hate the way they kind of just give you a clip it because they kind of just left you hanging there. But they like to say the importance right now is talking about preserving the rainforest. And one of the reasons we want to preserve the rainforest is because of the oxygen production, but mostly it's because of the other organisms that are produced in the rainforest. And a lot of them are essential for the medicines that we are making. All right, we have like 5 minutes left. I believe that most of you are 10th graders, and I will not see you on Wednesday because of PSAT. Everybody has to do the PSAT. If you're not aware of that, you need to make sure that you are, because I think you have to go someplace else. So make sure that you're paying attention to all the instructions about taking that exam, because all 8th and 10th graders are taking that exam on Wednesday. I will be here. So if you are a 9th grader, I will. No, you're not immune to seeing me on Wednesday. I'll be here. I'll be here. We'll do something else. We're not going to continue this. At your home school. Yes, thank you, Neve. You have to be at your home school and they said don't be late. So I would get there by 8:15 because the doors close and you'll be left out and then you won't be able to take the exam. And you do have to take this exam. So
What, Miss, what are you talking about?
Are you a 10th grader?
No.
What grade are you in?
9th grade.
9th. Okay, then I will see you on Wednesday. But half the class this is a mixed class. So if you are a 10th grader, I will not see you on Wednesday. If you are a ninth grader, then you need to log in as usual, and we'll do something else.
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. Okay. And I'm going to stop here because, like I said, and then we'll continue with this. We're going to look at the electromagnetic spectrum and what pigments do. So we're going to talk about light energy and what colors. And the reason we're going to talk about that is because certain colors are absorbed by the chlorophyll, and this is why we see green. And we're going to talk about why we see in this time of year, why the leaves turn, and we have all these other pretty colors that show up in the fall in our area. When I say our area, we are in a deciduous forest, which means that the leaves change and the trees drop their leaves, and that doesn't happen everywhere. It happens in a deciduous forest area. That's the kind of area that we live in. So we're going to talk about all of that eventually. Okay. All right. So I'm going to let you all go. It's almost time anyway. And rather than just try to start something else. So if I see you Wednesday, yay. And if not, good luck with your test. All right. So bye, y'all. Have a good afternoon. Oh, if you haven't finished your microscope activity, please do that, because that is going to be the first thing that's going to show up in the grade book tomorrow. I can't even grade it now because I won't see it because it's not in this grade book.